Hello and welcome to another tutorial video here from Zenatta Consulting. My name is Tyler Colt, and in this video, we're going to be going over Canvas View inside of Zoho CRM. Canvas View, if you don't know, is essentially a way to totally customize the look and feel of a particular record. In this video, we're going to be going through it for the deals module, but you can kind of use this in other modules as well. And before we jump in, I do always want to ask, if you find this video useful, please be sure to like and subscribe down below, as that really does help us out. And make sure if this sparks any feedback, questions, or video requests, that you leave those in the comments section down below the like button, as we do try to read through each and every one of those on a weekly basis. So before we jump into the walkthrough, I just want to do a quick word from our sponsor, and our sponsor is us. So inside of the CRM marketplace, we've got a new plugin here that we've rolled out called the Zenatta Health Check for Zoho CRM. This is a little tool that you can install in your system that will give you a couple high-level metrics about what is going on with your data. So everything from, do you have user licenses that you're not paying for? Do you have duplicate accounts? Do you have data that's missing a lot of important fields like deals without closing dates or overdue tasks? And it will wrap all this up and shoot it over to you via email on a regular basis. We're just charging $10 a month for this thing. You can get a free trial and get it installed now to see if it would be useful for you. So with that rapid fire sponsorship out of the way, let's jump into the tutorial. In our case here, like I mentioned, we're going to be talking through this from the perspective of a deal, kind of one of the workhorse records of CRM. So I've got a demo deal set up here. A couple things I just want to point your attention to that we'll highlight in the Canvas View build is inside this record, we've got some good information around discovery, right, that we might want to highlight a little bit inside of the user interface. We've also got some quotes and some tasks that are connected to this deal. I'll show you what I mean by this later, but one of the good advantages to the Canvas View is the ability to take some of these related lists and bring them up on the page so that they're not so far down. And I'll show you exactly how to do that. Now that we've gone over the deal that we're going to be building around, let's actually get started on the canvas. So I'm inside the settings here. I can jump into our canvas customization. There are two types of canvas views. You've got the list view, which is essentially going to apply when you're looking at a list of data. These we're not going to go over in much detail today. Just know that really everything I show you about the detail view, you can go and apply on the list views. Detail view, when we're talking about that, that is essentially this, right? It's when you're looking at one individual record. So we'll create a new record detail page. I will highlight you can import these from a template, which is pretty slick. In our case, we're going to start from scratch. Each canvas view will be unique to a layout. So in our case, we just have one layout for the deals. So we'll assign that. But if you did have like maybe a new customer deal versus a repeat business deal, and you wanted to highlight different information that was valuable for those different pipelines, you can surely do that here. Now I'm going to create that canvas. It's going to spin up in the background. And the first thing that it's going to do is give us the opportunity to launch this from a template. Now, in my opinion, you should start with a template when you're working inside a Canvas view. Reason is that even if you want to make significant changes to it, it will still save you a ton of time just starting with something on the page in front of you. I always like to highlight, they kind of show you a lot of templates in here that are for specific modules. Like when I look at this record here, it kind of makes me think this probably makes more sense for a contact than a deal. So I'm going to scroll through here and I'm going to find one that we like. I already know that I like this one. So we're going to use this as our template. Reason that I like it here, just from a kind of design perspective, I like this call out over here on the left where we can surface some of the important information. I like some of these little header fields, though I don't like that this is set to street, and I'll show you how to change that. And then I like this tab configuration on the side because it shows things like email and timeline really high up on the page in an easy to access place. I'm going to choose this template and I'm going to click select here in the bottom right, which will create that baseline for me. Before I jump in and actually make any changes to the canvas view, I want to show you over here on the left just what all of these categories are and how we might use them. So the one that you're going to use the most is this data section. The data section basically just gives you the opportunity to add any fields, any related lists like the quotes or tasks, any actions, so things like edit, delete, clone, find and merge duplicates, as well as buttons, right? So I've got a couple custom buttons here for sending a proposal, launching an FSM flow, or if you have any kiosks, you can connect those to your canvas as well. The one thing I do like to highlight here when we're talking about buttons is that if you don't add one of these actions, like for example, the edit button that would pull up like the full edit page here, then it will not show up and the user will not be able to do it. So you can't assume that anything's going to be on your canvas view if you don't put it on there, right? Even something like the delete button. A user would not be able to delete this record from Canvas if we don't put that button explicitly here on the page. Next section on the left is going to be elements. So I'm going to scroll down and just drag some of these onto this empty space here so you can see what they do. A section is really just like a container, right? So like this up here is a section, this details tab. This big blue thing here is a section, right? So these are kind of like things that you can use to define a background for a particular component. When you've dragged one in, you'll see over on the left all of these style configurations. So setting things like the background color, the border, if you want to drop shadow, do you want like a radius around the border and shadow? Do you want any padding? What's the width? What's the size, etc.? All of these should be pretty familiar if you've used any other design tools or even like document processing tools are going to generally have these in them. I'm going to right click and click delete, and then we'll jump into the next element. So tabs, as you'd expect, are things like this, where we're moving across a section of data. Tabs are one of the best things about Canvas View, in my opinion, because you're able to show so much data on one part of the screen, ideally without making the user scroll. One thing as you're doing system design is the less somebody has to scroll and the less somebody has to click, the more they're going to like that system. So if I were to drag like a tab into here, it's going to start with an unnamed tab. And then from within there, I can grab things from my data, from my related lists, and just move them right on into that particular tab. If I want multiple tabs, which I mean, you generally do, otherwise you just use a section, you can just click plus, and that's going to give you the opportunity to add more data to your tabs. Now I'm going to get rid of this for now, just as we are on to the next component. So next one is a table. Tables are kind of interesting, you know, in Canvas views. They're kind of hard to see without really looking at one that exists. So this all fields is set up as a table. And really, these are just a way to like more easily organize field data rather than having to like make sure everything is lined up just right. You know, you can essentially add a table and then go into that and add your data that way. So we can insert things like fields. So if I put like the amounts, or I put in the deal owner, right? It's just really making it so that everything lines up so that if you're picky about pixel perfect design, you can use these just a little bit more easily. I'm going to get rid of that for now, and we'll go on to our next section. Next one would be text. Text, exactly as it sounds, is just a thing that you can drag in to add a bit of text to a particular portion of your Canvas view. So if I click and drag this in, being a little funky with me here. There we go. These, important to note, these are not fields. These are just things that you can type into, right? So more like labels, like this details tab up here. Quick tip as we're going through this, don't feel obligated to use text to add the field names. Those are going to come in when we pull from the data tab. So we don't need to like go in and add all of these as just standalone text values. And I recommend that you don't, just in case in the future you ever rename a field, you want it to automatically rename here. Images, as we would expect, are just a way to drag in an image to a particular component or section of your Canvas view. So images here can either be from a link or from an image that we just upload directly into the URL. Next one will be icons. Icons are fun. I do like that they do these inside a Canvas view. So let's say I wanted to add a little icon here next to budget, make it look like some dollar signs or something, right? I can just drag in a little icon, place it where I want, size it up, and there we are, off to the races. Now everyone will know more quickly and easily that this field corresponds to something money related. Again, these are just little things, like you could get away without using icons, but as you go, just those quick little visual indicators are a big reason that you might consider using Canvas in the first place. Next one here, as we're running down the page, we've got the lines. I don't know if I need to show you that one. It's a line, right? You can essentially do a little design element where a line comes in on a certain place. And then buttons. Buttons are kind of a funky one here inside a Canvas view. Important to note that like when you drag a button in from elements, you're not adding like one of your custom buttons up here. So I don't use them that often. A lot of the times, like if I want an automated action where a user presses a button, I will create a custom button and then drag it into a canvas from the data section rather than setting up one of these buttons. So I don't recommend you spend too much time adding the buttons that way. I think it works a lot better to just do them in the data section instead. Style down here is really just something that will apply to whatever you've selected, right? So these are like all of your text identifiers and padding and fonts and colors. Reusable components, if you're adding a lot of canvas views to different places, you can save entire components to a library and then quickly and easily add those in. They do also have a gallery with a handful of, components. A lot of these are kind of contact centric, as you can see from the side. But so again, we don't have any custom elements saved, so we're not going to spend too much time here. Last but not least, client script. This is a whole separate video. Client scripts are just little functions that can run instantly as the user is like typing into fields or interacting with data. We don't have any set up in this demo account, so there are none to add here. Now that we've gone over everything over on the left-hand side, let's actually get into making some changes and updates to our canvas view structure. So here, if you've been paying attention, you'll probably notice that something that I did here messed up the spacing between these two sections, and now this is up in the front. What I can do is grab this element, come over here to the side, and just make sure that I have pushed it to the back. That just kind of resets us back to how this was looking before whatever I did to bring that up to the front. A couple things we always want to do as we go through and define a canvas view. Let me just bring this to the top as well. Making sure that, most importantly, we're showing the right data in the right place. So I'm going to show you a couple things as we go through here. First of which is going to be how to change out an existing field for a new one. So when we're working with a template, what we don't want to do, like let's say we look up in the top right and we see this street is one of the highlighted fields. And we go, I don't think street is that important, right? And I definitely don't need it front and center when I'm looking at a canvas. One way of swapping this field out would be to come in here and maybe choose a new field like contact name and drag it in. What we'll notice, though, is that this formatting is essentially set as a baseline. Instead of coming in here, then looking at this field, trying to copy all these various different style elements, I don't want to do that. That takes too much time. So instead, I'll just right-click on this field, click on Change Field, and then grab the value that I actually want, which is the contact name. Especially when we're working from templates, that is always the way that you want to manage what fields are on the page. Is if it's already there, you just want to swap it, don't recreate it, just right click and change that field. I'm going to do the same thing here for campaign source. That's not as commonly used in this system. Lead source might be a more appropriate one, so I can just add that here. Now, let's say we did actually want to add some new fields and set up the formatting for those. How would we do that? So over here on the right, we've got this details section. I'm seeing city, description, lead source again, and state. Let's say I don't really care about these, right? So I'm going to delete this one and just delete each of these fields that I don't care about. Not that I don't care, it's just I don't care enough is really what I should say. So now I can come into the data section on the left and choose some data that I want to add. So as I mentioned earlier, we've got this discovery information, the budget, the deadline, the type of work that we're going to be doing. This is the exact type of information that we want to highlight and surface on a deal. So we're going to use that here under our discovery details. First thing I'll do is I'll give this a quick rename. Then I'll come into my data and start clicking and dragging in my fields. One thing I recommend is don't worry about getting the spacing right when you are initially dragging them in, and I'll show you why. So as I drag this, you get very minimal red lines when you're initially adding a field. Once you've added it though, and you click and drag, you'll kind of get that like snap to functionality that we're used to seeing in design tools. I will say it can be a bit arduous to get everything perfectly lined up. So iterate, right? Get it close enough, move forward, and then come back and fix up all the nitty gritty, right? If you get stuck trying to make things pixel perfect the first go around, you'll just waste a lot of time. Where like most users are not going to notice 19 versus 20 pixels. We call that good enough, at least for version 1. Now, looking at these fields, we can see that I don't really like the colors, right? Like we've got this darker background and these fields are kind of dark. So how would we go about changing that? I'm going to select this field as a whole, and we'll see that the blue box is around the entirety of the field. Maybe I want to kind of copy some of the other formatting that we see. And what I see on here is that we have this kind of like dark yellow color that seems to be for like the names of things. And then we have some white values that are kind of like the values that line up to that field name. So if I want to apply that format, I can click here under budget, specifically into the label section of the field. I can come over to the left-hand side and I can select a color. It's given me some of the standard colors that are used on this template. So I'll go ahead and select that orange. Then I'll go over here to the right and I'll select the value and I'll set that to a different color. So maybe something like white. And right away, we can just see like this is much more legible now than it was before. You never want a dark color on a dark color or a light color on a light color. One thing I always will highlight, and I'll mention it a couple times, once you have something that you like, kind of like the design of a field that you might like, or maybe the design of a related list, right click on it right away and add it to presets. Because now if I want to apply that to a different field, I can just select that, come in and apply my presets. Saves you a bunch of time, right? So even like what I showed earlier around swapping out that contact name field, another way that you could do that would just be by right-clicking this, adding it to a preset, and then applying it, right? So you can go either way, but the most important thing is that as you go and as you're working through a canvas, I strongly recommend that you save things to presets, right? Like do not spend a lot of time recreating the same formatting over and over and over again. It'll drive you crazy and you'll never get your canvas view done. So far, we've kind of gone over these left-hand sections. We've gone over swapping some fields around as well as applying formats to fields. Next thing that I want to talk through is how to work with related lists inside of a canvas view. Like I mentioned earlier, I think that the ability to bring related lists up to the top of a canvas is one of the most important things and one of the most driving reasons that one might choose to use a canvas view. Here down below, we see that we've got these two related lists, one for quotes and one for open calls. As I mentioned earlier, in our deal, we don't really use the calls a lot here. Instead, really, we're working in a task system. This is where you're going to need to apply your own understanding of your platform, right? And make sure that you are surfacing the data that's important for your team. Over here under the open calls, again, I'm just going to right click and change that related list. Now I'll highlight, I could come in and I could save this potentially as like a preset and then come into my data section and then bring in the related list for tasks, right? And I could just click and drag it right on in and there it is. But instead, I want to keep the formatting relatively close to what I've already got here. So I'll right click it and I'll just change that related list over to open tasks. Just like that, it's now swapped over and we are good to go. One thing I'll highlight as well is that like this styles and even the data tab are going to be contextual based on what I have selected. I'll show that example here of what I mean by that with the quotes. Once I've selected this quotes related list, or actually I'll even go further and I'll select the data inside of one quote. Now, if I click into data, it's going to show me fields from that quote module, right? And so inside of here, maybe I want to swap out like this valid until field for something else, right? I can just come in, swap out the field to maybe the, I don't know, let's say grand total. That seems like more important than just that due date. Another thing that I can do, and I recommend that you do, is make sure that you come in here and add some like buttons or options within this section. So like if I grab this quote field, what we'll see is that there's no way to edit this right now, like choose one quote and quickly move into the edit page. So maybe I want to click and drag this edit button over, kind of add it to that quote view. I'll add it up here, just to make it a little bit easier to interact with the quotes that are in this list. You always want to make sure that you're bringing those buttons in, because as I mentioned earlier, if you don't put it there, it's not going to exist, right? It's not going to be a part of the view at all. Looking here, we do have some templates around these different related list views that we can cycle through. I am a big proponent of templates. I think it's almost always better in a canvas view to start with a template and edit from there rather than starting from scratch. So maybe for these tasks, I want to click through and find one that I like. This one here looks pretty good. Immediately though, I do see some issues with the field colors, right? So maybe I want to come in and just apply some of my like labels and values to this. Now you can see I've saved a couple presets here, right? And what we'll notice is that as I apply it to one, it'll automatically apply to every single task that's in this list. So that formatting will kind of save and apply across the board. Again, I might want to come in here and swap around some of these fields. Like I don't think modified time is really the most important thing here, but we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. I've already showed you how to do that. Now, one of the last things I do want to cover is working with buttons and kind of how those work when you add them to a canvas view. So over here on the left, I can see we've got a couple of these buttons that are set up under this highlight information. Maybe this like delete button, maybe I don't need that. Or maybe the users who are going to use this don't even have permissions to delete a record, right? So if they don't have permissions to do it, I don't want them to even see that it's an option. So I can remove that. I can go ahead and click and drag in maybe like a send proposal button instead and work with that from right here. One important note as you're doing this is that these custom buttons can also have little icons in them the same way that these can. So to add that icon, I can just right click here, go into show icon, and then select what I want. So maybe for our proposal, I think there's one down here that looks kind of like a writer document that would kind of line up with a proposal. Yeah, that'll do. So we can add that little proposal icon and add it to our button. We'll also see like this looks a little funky, so maybe we want to mess around with some of the spacing here. So I can select my button, I can come up to the top left, and I can make some adjustments to how I want the icon to show up. So to move that button to the top, I can just right click here, and they call the icon the label when you have them inside of a button. So I can do this label top. I can then also select the button, and I see it's not really centered right now, so I can add some padding. All the way on the left side will be the left-hand padding, so maybe I'll try like 40 pixels, and that looks pretty good. Make this just a little bit bigger so that our icon can actually be a little bit more visible. Oop, it's fighting me a bit here. Let me increase that size and we'll be right back. All right, so I've got that icon set up here. One thing I'll note is you can see as I'm going through this tutorial that even someone who uses this all the time, sometimes you need to monkey with it. Sometimes it fights you a little bit. So don't feel bad if you get a little frustrated when you're building these out. It happens to everybody. This thing can be a little bit finicky. Once it's set up, they're great, but they do take a little bit of TLC to get them just right. So don't feel bad if you find yourself just getting a little annoyed sometimes as you are working through building out the canvas view. And so with that, I think we have covered essentially everything that we want to do here inside of our canvas view editor. Now let's actually jump back over to that deal and see what it looks like in practice. So I'll give this thing a name and I'll click save. I always like to do this canvas assignment so that we can set up if different people want to view the canvas by default or if they want to view the standard record view by default. I'll tell you, I like the standard record view, but in this case, we're going to move everybody over to canvas and click save one more time. So now all I need to do on my deal to get this to show up is click refresh. Now that canvas view will apply and it will show for this particular deal. And so we can see we've got our discovery details up here. We've got this nice related list of quotes that we can interact with. And, all of these become links, of course, where I can go to those records directly. If you ever do want to turn Canvas View off for a moment, you can just come down here to the bottom and click on the standard view. And that will just kind of punt you right out of the Canvas View back into the normal record. I'm going to leave it in Canvas for now. But so I think that covers everything that we wanted to cover here today for the Canvas View walkthrough. Really do hope that this video is useful for you. It's been a long time coming. We've had a lot of requests for this. If you found it useful, please be sure to like and subscribe down below, as that really does help us out. And if it sparks any feedback, questions, or additional video requests, leave those in the comment section down below that like button, as we do try to read through each and every one of those on a weekly basis. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.